I just want to welcome you to our Animal Justice Academy Lunchtime Live. I'm Kimberly Carroll. I'm the AJA Director. Our topic today is academic activism. So I want to welcome all of you beautiful beings who are here with us live. We really appreciate your energy here in this gathering. And I also want to welcome those of you who are watching the replay. In this special edition, this pre-Canadian Animal Law Conference edition, we have 4 brilliant scholars taking us behind the curtain of academia and what a powerful role it's playing in the animal protection movement. So let me give you a little background on each one of them. Actually, you can probably spotlight us now. Angela Fernandez is a full professor at the Faculty of Law at University of Toronto, where she's cross-appointed to the Department of History and teaches a course in animal law, as well as overseeing the production of the Brooks Animal Law Digest, Canada edition, and the Animal Law Research Guide. She's the author of Pearson versus Post, The Hunt for the Fox, Law and Professionalism in American Legal Culture. Angela is also a member of the Brooks Institute for Animal Rights, Law and Policy Collaborative Research Network, BASIN. BASIN, did I say that right, Angela?
I think we usually say Bassan, but
Bassan. Okay, much more fancy. I like that. So welcome, Angela. So good to have you here.
Yeah.
All right, Jodi Lazare is an assistant professor at the Schulich School of Law at Dalhousie University. She teaches and researches in the areas of family law, animals in the law, and constitutional law. As a law student, Jodi worked in both small and large private practice. Jodi completed her articles as a law clerk to the Honorable Mr. Justice Michael Moldaver at the Supreme Court of Canada. Jodi, did I say Moldaver wrong? I said it right? Okay, okay, excellent. Yeah. And that is very impressive. Also, Jodi was the co-producer of our very first Canadian Animal Law Conference in Halifax. So Jodi, welcome. So good to have you here, my friend.
Pleasure to be here.
Excellent. We have also a familiar face here in the AJA community. Jason Hannan is Associate Professor in the Department of Rhetoric, Writing and Communications at the University of Winnipeg. He's also the editor of Meatsplaining, the Animal Agriculture Industry and Rhetoric of Denial. His current animal-related book project, I'm so excited about this one, New White Saviors, The Colonial Mythology of Meat, which explores the meat industry's violent history of ethnic cleansing and ecological imperialism. Each fall, Jason teaches a course called The Rhetoric of Animality, which examines how Western religion, culture, and society reinforces human power and domination over animals. And Jason is also the chair of the Winnipeg Veg Fest coming up on Saturday, woohoo! The largest vegan and animal rights festival in Manitoba. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Especially as you are probably going nuts trying to prepare for Saturday. What a hero.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's a lot of work.
I'm sure you've got this like a little bit of a deer in the headlights look right now. That's all right. So Jodi is in the middle of a move. So you are all heroes, joining us today. And last but not least, we needed to have a recent grad, a non-prof, Michael Swistara. He is a recent graduate of the George Washington University, where he received a joint law and public policy degree. During law school, Michael served as the president of the GW Law Student Animal Legal Defense Fund. And last year, he was an Emerging Scholars Fellow with the Brooks Institute for Animal Rights Law and Policy. His academic work focuses primarily on farmed animal protection and the intersection of animal law and other social justice movements. His scholarly work has appeared in the Michigan Journal of Race and Law, the Animal Law Review, the University of Miami Race and Social Justice Law Reviews, plenty of others. We're going to link to Michael's works here in the chat as well. Oh, I see Ina already has. Outside of academia, Michael has worked at organizations like Mercy for Animals and Animal Outlook. He's drafted local animal protection bills, lobbied city officials, and pushed for change in his school and city communities to make them more vegan and animal friendly, which we have talked a lot about here in Animal Justice Academy. Michael, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's really great to be here. And I've definitely learned a lot from the rest of the AJA community as well.
Yeah, Michael, you went through the course right when it was first released and everything, and we're an active participant in the academy. So I love having you here. Excellent. Okay, so folks, I'm going to invite you, unless you have a really loud noise behind you, open up your mics because we're starting the chat here. I want to start by just getting a little bit from each of you. I think everybody's curious probably about what led you to this path, blending your scholarly pursuits with animal activism. I want to know, did the scholar come first for you or did the activist come first? Jodi, I want to start with you with that.
Okay. I think scholar first, but animal lover, of course, before that, right? So, love animals like everyone else here, I'm sure. And have always had an interest, and I've always tried to incorporate that into my kind of academic pursuits. So I studied journalism before law school, and whenever I had, a choice, I would write something about animals. And I did the same really whenever I was able to, and I took an animal law class during my master's. And then so my doctorate was in family law, so I was hired at Dalhousie primarily based on that. But it just so happened that my colleague Von Black, who was one of the first people to offer an animal law course in a Canadian law school, retired the year that I started on tenure track at Dal. So that was just a happy coincidence that I was able to kind of slide in and take his course, and then take over his course. And the rest has kind of flowed from there. I had an opportunity to organize a conference. So I teamed up with Animal Justice. We organized the first Canadian Animal Law Conference, and it really showed me that there was a real kind of appetite for this and for the work. And then, Canada started adopting ag-gag laws, which relate to constitutional law, which I also teach. So it all kind of just came together and has kind of taken off from there.
Jodi, I'm so sorry that I called you an assistant professor.
No,
You are an
okay.
associate professor. I don't know where that copy got changed, but I'm like, oh my God,
too, so
big difference.
Yeah.
So yeah, Jodi is an associate professor. That is oh my God. And in academia, that is a big faux pas. Yeah, so Jodi, yeah, so I want to dig in more around the specific work and reactions to your work at Dalhousie. But let's move on to Jason. So Jason, scholar first, animal activist first.
Scholar first and then animal activist. So I joined the University of Winnipeg in 2013, and I wasn't doing any activism at the time. I had only been vegan for 3 years. So the way it worked for me was somehow I got onto this board for a speaker series on campus. And the idea was to invite some world-renowned, influential public figure who can come and inspire the community. And so the year that I was on the board, I pushed very, very heavily for Jane Goodall because she's just a hero to everyone, including to me. And so they voted to bring her in, and she accepted, and we brought her in. And so they asked me then to teach a course revolving around animals. So I did, and it was meant to be an experimental course. I think it was called Humanity, Animality, Secularity. And so it was just about how our values have shifted over time from a religious time to a more kind of modern secular time, and how this is affecting our values and how we're changing the way that we think about animals. So it was a really, really fun course. I had a very good response from my students, and I enjoyed it so much, and they enjoyed it so much that I decided I would want to turn it into a permanent course. So I put in an application. I called it the Rhetoric of Animality, and the curriculum committee liked it. So now it's a permanent course. It became as far as I know, the first animal studies course, animal ethics course in the university. So I was really, really happy about that. And so I've been teaching that one ever since. I'm not teaching it this term just because I have a course reduction. So actually it's being taught this term by Jessica Scott Reed.
Yes, I saw that. That's amazing.
Yeah, so she's the perfect person to be teaching it this term. And then I started VegFest on campus in 2017, and the university has been extremely supportive. They've given us probably $20,000 in funding over the last 5 years. They have given a lot of administrative support. So I get a lot of institutional support for VegFest, which is really, really wonderful. So yeah, since I taught that course, I put out the meat-splaining book that wasn't even intended to be for scholars. That was intended to be for an activist press, but I couldn't get an activist press to take it on because they felt it was too academic. So I went with the university press, and yeah, now I'm doing critical animal studies. It just sort of happens. So. Yeah.
Love it. And then so where did the veganism come into play for you?
That happened when I was in Chicago. It started with health reasons. My dad's a cancer biologist, and so I'd just been reading about, animal foods and cancer. I didn't even know very much about, the animal farming. So it started with the health reasons. And at first I told myself, I'm going to be plant-based. I'm not going to be vegan. And that lasted about a week. And then I'm like, no, fuck it, I'm vegan. And so, yeah, that's how it happened.
Excellent. And we're very glad for it, Jason. Glad to have you in our arena.
Thanks.
Angela, how about you? Did the scholar come first or the animal advocate?
Yeah, so for me, I would say is very much a scholarly start. And, I've been at U of T now for about almost 20 years, actually. So I would say my first decade, I was really doing very kind of middle of the road legal scholarship, not relating to animals at all in a way, contracts and legal process and legal history is my main area of background. And then I started to be working on the book you mentioned, Pearson and Post, about the fox. And I created a group at U of T, an interdisciplinary group at the Jackman Humanities Institute, and we were all working on animal projects in different departments and disciplines. And members of that group started reading chapters of that book. And it was in that process that I really started to think, oh, I need to build in some perspective of the animal here. And it kind of grew from there. So in a very unexpected way. Again, I sometimes say to people, I came at it sideways, or I kind of fell into it. I'm not sure you found me. I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure what happened.
We hunted you down, Angela.
But yeah, but so now yeah, so that's really what I would say. I was just going to comment on, I saw Sarit wrote in the chat that there was no animal law program or course in 1999 when she was here. So I just wanted to share with everyone, the course is happening every year now. We've got 50 people in it this fall. We had 50 people in it last fall. So there's a real momentum happening here at U of T now with it. And along with those other initiatives, Kimberly graciously mentioned, like the digest and the research guide. And of course, the conference next weekend. We're so excited to be doing it in person finally.
I know. I know.
Jodi did the first one in person there, and that seemed like so long ago. And then we were online, as many of you probably know, for there a bunch of years. How many years is that? I don't even know.
2 years we were online. Yeah.
It's amazing that there's 50 people enrolled in the course there. That's awesome.
And there's a wait list. There's a wait list. Like, I'm getting
no way.
Fernandez, can you let me in? And
I have record enrollment too this year.
Do you, Jodi?
I think it's a seminar, so it's capped at 16. At one point, I had a wait list. Right now, I think I have 13 or 14.
And Jodi, I don't know if you're like me, where you think sometimes I like to take credit for this. And in some respects, some of the students I went around and asked, like, what brings you here and that. And a lot of people were like, oh, I heard last year was really good. So there was a kind of a word of mouth thing. But I do also just think it's timing. It's offering this at a moment where people are ready for it. There's more people now saying I'm vegan or I'm vegetarian already in the group and who are coming to it for those reasons. So it's very exciting to be part of that. So I'm so glad to have been hunted down.
Excellent. Yay. Thank you, Angela. Michael, now you, we really wanted to get the perspective of like a grad student. So tell us a little bit about what came first for you, the scholar or the activist?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was actually the opposite for me. Our activist definitely came first. I first went vegetarian and then, like Jason, very soon thereafter, fully vegan when I was an undergrad in Montreal several years ago. And then I went off and got a whole different master's degree, and I worked for several years. And during that time, got more involved in vegan communities and spaces where I was living in, vegan potlucks and running groups, and then sort of more interested in advocacy from there. And very consciously, when I was applying to law schools, it was because I wanted to work in the animal law or environmental field, and I wanted to, fight factory farming for all of the reasons that I think people here are also in this community. And so when I came to law school and started doing the kind of scholarly work that you mentioned in my bio, it was very much coming from a place of having already been vegan and been an advocate for several years.
Mm. Well, and I sort of want to jump off of that, Michael, because um, it's, you were somebody who was, in the movement, working for some big orgs, and you went, this is the way I want to go. And so what was it about, the opportunities that academia supplied that drew you onto this path?
Part of it was I felt really lucky with the people I got to meet at the right times that kind of pointed me in this direction. But I was also trying to figure out what best sort of is that intersection of what I care about and what I think I'm good at. And a lot of the fields that I was interested in for a very brief period was journalism, Jodi. And then at other times it was, academia, it was political campaign work. A lot of folks who I was speaking to in all these different fields had law degrees. And I thought maybe I should just do that and see where that leads me. And then as soon as I got to law school, I met fantastic people at GW and in the animal law community who kind of pointed me to where I am now. So it was really just that overlap of skills and interest that led me down this path.
Yeah, and I love, Animal Justice Academy, one of the things we really sort of, one of our pillars is that no matter where you are, who you are, and what you're doing in life, you can weave animal advocacy into it. So I love that you have all found a way to take what you are so good at and blend in this meaningful purpose that you have around animal advocacy as well. So, but tell me a little bit more about why it is that you think having scholars working, having scholars included in this movement and the work that folks are doing in academia is such an important element in the animal protection movement. Angela, can I throw that to you?
Yes, Kimberly, the thing that really jumps to mind to me is that, academics, we have such a privileged position in the sense of being, you and Jodi were just talking about going from assistant to associate. So for people who don't know, when you do that, you get tenured, right? When you become an associate, and Jodi's now at the other side of that. So that's an awesome feeling. And so basically what that means is that you can say really whatever you want. And you're not constrained by, things, many of the same things that other people are constrained by. And I think sometimes, we can talk about this a little bit more, we're in disciplines. And so to some extent, we sort of discipline ourselves, I think sometimes. But really, we are in this very good position where if we sort of make a decision about what we want to work on, we can just go for it, write an article about that, write a book about that. We can network the way that we think would be most effective. And really, the institution supports us in those choices. So it's a very, very lucky role and spot to be in if you can get to it.
And it is quite different than what we're dealing with in other parts of the movement. I mean, even if we're running groups and organizations, we have to cater to our donors, our supporters, what is sort of most pressing. And whereas it seems like in the world of academia, you have a little bit more space to go deeper into some of the places we need to go. Am I on to something here? Yeah. Jodi, tell me a little bit about what you think is, so important about having scholars working in the movement.
I don't think it's controversial to say that for a long time, and in the view of probably people still, or some people, animal rights has often been kind of like a fringe subject. And having, like legitimate scholars working on these questions, offering the course in law schools. I mean, Angela's got 50 people in her course. I think that lends like real legitimacy, you know, to the movement and to what we're doing. In addition to you know, just visibility to yet another audience, right? You know, like I talk with my colleagues, workshop stuff, and they're like, "Oh my God, I did not know that." Some of them do know it, but yeah, it's just kind of broadening the audience. Yeah, and then there's, I mean, I don't want to jump ahead, but the fact that people are working on this and there is scholarship and expertise at an academic level, I think also is useful in terms of like effecting change at the sort of political level as well. I can speak more to that a little later or
well, yeah, I mean, let's talk about that a little bit, Jodi, because again, there is not only space, but there is a requirement in academia to, you know, be heavily researched. And again, in a lot of the rest of the movement, we don't have time for that. You know, we don't have the money, we don't have the time for it. And so you know, that sounds like it's a huge piece. I mean, to have that kind of research behind us.
Yeah, I mean, the time and space to do that work, I mean, has enabled me and others to participate in like legislative processes, talk to legislators and policymakers about, you know, the wisdom or legality or constitutionality of their proposed legislation. You know, often they don't listen, sometimes they do. But again, just kind of getting it out there, you know, on the record. Everything you say, you know, to Parliament or in a committee is public record and accessible going forward, like forever. So having that background and the time and space and support to create that knowledge and then share it, I think is really invaluable.
Amazing. Anyone else want to weigh in as far as an important element that you feel, what you feel is really important about having scholars in this movement?
I'll jump in if there's an opportunity.
Oh, who's that?
Oh, this is Sue from Toronto, or from New York, but I went to University of Toronto. I graduated in '99, so my ears just perked up when I heard 50 kids in the class. It's so incredible and it's so exciting. Such brilliant students, and to think of 50 of them all interested in the subject. And I think, Jodi, you mentioned, you know, just under 20. I mean, that's just, I'm just like, it's just amazing how much progress we've made. And also a lot of the things we're talking about here, I mean, it's something, so I moved to New York after graduating from law school in '99, moved to New York. I had an opportunity and I've been practicing sort of in the corporate space. I'm now in Thomson Reuters trying to figure out how to incorporate animal stuff into the work that I do sort of indirectly. But at any rate, one thing, everything that everyone is saying is really resonating with me. And one of the things that I've discovered in my journey is, as a sort of an animal person, dressed up as an attorney, I guess, as a corporate attorney, is that a lot of times I love the passion, I love the energy of the activists, but I also, having spent so many years in the corporate space and legal space, I understand that we sometimes have to change our tactics. We have to be strategic, and we have to think about how are we actually going to effectively change the minds of the people who are actually decision makers. So it's the CEOs, and it's the folks who are working in public relations, and it's the attorneys who Angela mentioned are very privileged, have a lot of power. And sometimes I get so frustrated when I go to a march or something, and I see the approach, because I love the passion and the energy, but I also know the conservative folks that I'm surrounded by in my day-to-day and the communities I live in. And I just feel like there's a disconnect. We're not going to necessarily, just like Chanel markets their brand a particular way, whether it's right or not. I just feel like sometimes there's a disconnect between we're not being strategic enough, and I think it's hurting animals. And I mean I love how much progress we've made in 20 plus years, But I think going forward, we could move things faster if we were more strategic. And I think bringing the academics and this high esteemed panel and their students into this journey and widening the audience is I hope what it's going to take to sort of push this movement over to where it needs to be.
Okay, thank you. We actually, I'm not sure how you got unmuted there because we usually have everybody muted. But you know, that was a beautiful little addition and a surprise addition. You're like a ninja panelist there for us. So thank you. I think we've got everybody muted now, Ina. Okay, so we're gonna go on. So sorry, Jason or Michael, was there anything else you wanted to say in terms of the importance of having scholars involved in the movement? And if not, we'll just move on if there's nothing more you want to add to this.
Michael, go ahead.
I think Angela and Jodi did a great job.
Okay,
of
excellent.
talking about it. So.
Well, then, then let's move on to, I'd like to hear more about the kinds of scholarly research that you've seen, either your own or others, that you've seen really kind of move the needle in the movement. So over the years, and it can be in big ways or smaller ways, but I'd love to hear if there's something in particular that you'd like to point to. Anybody want to go for that? Nope. It's Jodi, do you have anything on that realm?
I mean, I think everyone's work is so important, all the work that's being done around like personhood and legal status, like Angela's work, for example, and other colleagues, that's being relied on by like the Non-Human Rights Project and their like small victories through dissenting judges and that kind of thing, it's amazing to see. I can talk about my own.
Yes,
work.
I would love to hear more about what you've seen,
yeah.
how you've seen your work influence things.
I guess the biggest like concrete impact I've seen, which was like very cool, was when I spoke to the Agri-Food Committee federally, who was studying a federal ag-gag bill, which died on the order table when the election was called and has now been reincarnated in its former version. I talked to the committee about how, based on my thinking, research and understanding of constitutional law, that the bill wasn't doing what it was supposed to do in the way that it was written, and convinced a majority of that committee to vote for a change to the bill, which would make it not an ag-gag bill, basically, which would impose like biosecurity measures, not just on activists or people on a farm illegally, but on everyone, including participants in the industry. So that was like a huge victory. The bill died again. So
which basically, which was not going to be championed anymore by the industry, because the last thing they want is to be under biosecurity rules.
Exactly,
kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's since been revived by the same MP, and maybe we'll have to do it all over again. But so that was a pretty cool thing to see. Just the work actually having a concrete impact at the policy level. And my ag-gag work, I hope, might have an influence in the constitutional challenge to ag-gag laws that Animal Justice has brought. But
it's all on your shoulders, Jodi. We're suing the Ontario government, and it's all about you. Yeah,
it's not at all the book.
But Jodi's work has been Jodi's work has been absolutely vital to us and our work in animal justice. So thank you so much, Jodi.
Mm-hmm.
What about Jason? What have you seen? How have you seen your work sort of affect people, and that could be including meat-splaining?
That's been it's been interesting to see how that book has been taken up by different audiences. So, for example, I got invited to this conference in May called the Healthy Public Lands Conference in the US, which is it was organized by a group called the Western Watersheds Project. And their goal is to get rid of all ranching on public lands in the United States. And they've had some record of success with this. They're a lobby group, and they've convinced a number of people in Congress to pass laws prohibiting ranching on public lands in the U.S. So they had the whole conference about this, and they wanted me to go into, the kind of the history of ranching mythology, and the people in the audience were journalists, and there were some policymakers, right? So it was unexpected but very exciting to see that you can be a part of these kinds of conversations that can hopefully bring about real material change, and help to return the land to the animals and take them away from ranchers, right? So that was one nice like outcome of the book getting published. Another interesting one was the way that the book has been received by journalists in different countries. So I did some interviews with some European journalists. One was from Spain, and so he he works for some Spanish newspaper, and I had no idea that there's a really thriving vegan and animal rights movement in Spain, because you would think of Spain as one of the most kind of beef obsessed countries in the world, right? But he told me that there's a very strong animal rights movement there, and they're trying very hard to change the culture. And people in Spain are, moving away from beef and recognizing that they need to embrace a plant-based lifestyle for the sake of the planet, right? So being a part of these policy conversations, and then if you are involved in animal scholarship, you will get these interviews. It's a good way for getting ideas out there into the public realm, right?
Yeah,
So
and getting access to arenas that you wouldn't necessarily any other way.
Yeah, exactly. You will start to play the role, whether you plan it or not, of a public intellectual, and I think that's one that if you're, if you do this kind of scholarship, you should absolutely embrace.
Love it. Michael, you've written quite a bit of things, done quite a bit of research. Anything in particular that you're kind of excited that got some traction or got picked up or used?
I think most of my scholarship is a little new or recent to have legs so far. My 3 law review articles all came out within the last probably 8 or 9 months, just the way that they stacked. And similarly with some of my other writings, either upcoming or recent. So I've gotten positive and some negative feedback on my law review articles, but I don't think I can speak the way that my other panelists can about having seen sort of broader ripples from that. But I can definitely speak to other things that I've seen in terms of changes just since the time I decided to come to law school in the movement. And I know 3 of us on the panel are within the legal field. A lot of that I see is within animal law, but I think it's also worth mentioning scholarship outside of the legal sphere as well. Natural scientists doing work on the inner and social lives of non-human animals, social scientists doing work on social change and movement theory. I've seen some new developments there that are really exciting as well.
Amazing, Michael. Yeah, there's so many different areas that there's just amazing academic research happening that is coming from animal advocates. So thank you for reminding us of all the different arenas. Angela, what's what have you sort of seen?
It's interesting, like Michael, what you just said about, the articles are new, so you're not sure how they're going. And I feel like, what though, it's always like that with the writing. You do it and you almost have to like write for yourself because you're not sure that there's anybody who's going to be interested in this or maybe not interested in it to the degree that you are, that they're actually going to read this thing all the way through, you know? So with my book, like I get sometimes now emails from people and they're like, oh my goodness, Angela, I'm reading this part. It's so cool. And it made me think of this. And I have this correspondence right now with Carol Adams because she's really into like the way I use Melville and Moby Dick in it and stuff like that. And it's completely unexpected. You know, like I had no idea in my mind when I was doing that, oh my gosh, it could go off in this cool way, you know? And I think that that is one of the things is when we write, we do it for, you know, like for it to be cited, maybe like way down the road. It could eventually become something quite canonical in other people's courses and so on. And so I think those influences are important. And I think for me, with students, especially like with something like Pearson and Post, you know, law students are doing that in their first year property classes all over the US, all over Canada. It's like hundreds of thousands of law students every year. So if you can sort of get them to think, hey, you know, animals are not paradigmatically property. Or if you are being told in this class and you're being basically like indoctrinated into thinking that, here are some tools and resources for thinking about that more critically. And if you're one of the people who's sitting there, like Jodi mentioned at the beginning, like, you know, so many people involved in this work, they just love animals. That's where it comes from. So if you're sitting in that classroom and that's you, and you're thinking, oh, I got to like hammer that part out of me because it doesn't fit here. It's not what it means to learn how to think like a lawyer or to be here or to whatever. Then I think that that's very crucial support. And I think that that work probably goes on a lot of the time. And no one is necessarily going to write you an email or tell you that, but hopefully it's having that kind of an impact. And so insofar, you know, I feel like when I write, I kind of try not to think of like, who's going to use this, what's this going to be useful for? But I do think it could very well have those kinds of collateral effects, which would be very cool.
Amazing, Angela. Thank you. There's a question, and folks, we will try to take some questions. *** Q in the comment if you have a question. Tenebrae asks, how can animal misuse or use be incorporated into course content without seeming to promote an agenda? And they said, obviously I have an agenda, but it is more effective to lead people to discovery than to tell them. So yeah, just can we talk a little bit about how your teachings have been received at the university, both by the students and by the powers that be, whether you've had pushback, what you've done around that, and how you are able to maintain integrity as a scholar while still having this, this strong mission inside of you. How do you balance that? Let's start, Jodi, how about you? Let's start with you.
Yeah, so I did throw something in the chat, just that in the classroom, at least I try to stay kind of neutral about things and have students come to their own conclusions. We watch a video, let's say we watch a video of like the Save Movement vigil. I mean, for me, it's pretty hard to come to any other conclusion than, wow, the way we treat pigs on a truck is horrible, just having them come to that on their own. I think it's tough though, I think when students are signed up for animal law, that's the course and that's what they know they're getting. When I'm talking to other academics, I don't know. I think it's a bit more controversial, really, because it makes people really face their choices and their everyday actions like everybody else. Yeah, that's not answering the question.
No, it's great. No, but I am curious to hear whether you folks have experienced, first of all, pushback from your university or from students. Anybody had pushback, or is it the opposite? Well, Jason, you've had a really a great experience with U of W.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, I don't even pretend to be neutral in that class. Like, I mean, if somebody were to teach a class on human rights, it would be pro-human rights. If somebody were to teach a class in women's and gender studies, it would be, pro-feminist class. I say at the beginning, this is a very pro-animal rights class. It has a very obvious kind of explicit orientation. And so I just kind of get that out of the way at the beginning. That doesn't mean that it's all just kind of propaganda. I mean, they still have to do research. They still have to ask a research question, right? But the class is just kind of unapologetically, pro animal rights. And there, I will get the occasional student who will try to sort of resist, because the course is designed to get people to question their basic values, right? So you will get some of that in the beginning, but they usually just kind of give up and just sort of accept the premise of the course, right? And you're right. It's been nothing but supportive from the at the institutional level, from my colleagues, from the administration, and the students have been overwhelmingly supportive. And every time I've taught the class, there will always be at least a few students at the end who end up going vegan, and some of them have ended up joining our Veg Fest team. So yeah, it's quite nice. I have no complaints.
Wonderful.
Jason, I was just
Angela.
going to say that segues kind of nicely into what I've sort of settled on as the way to do this in the first class, because it's still drop ad, so you can still get out. If you feel like you are going to disagree really fundamentally, like with everything that's coming forward. But so I say to them, you don't have to be vegan or vegetarian to be here, but I do hope you will be by the end of the course.
Oh,
To
nice.
just kind of make it like a joke, but also to sort of message, like, because if there are people who are going to be really, it's gonna the whole time, like they don't want to be there. You don't probably want them there either. So I think it's good to maybe signal a little bit, while at the same time, like Jodi's saying, like try to just present the material and let them come to what would be a pretty obvious conclusion most of the time.
To be clear, I do preface the class with the fact that we're here to look at all of the problematic ways that the law, treats animals. I quote from the Reese decision, to hold up a mirror, right? And so it's not a secret where I'm coming from, but yeah, I think just presenting the information goes a long way.
Michael, how about you as in your student experience? Did you get, you did a lot of your research, or it was around the theme of, with animal issues. Did you get pushback on that, or was that fairly, was your experience fairly positive in that way?
My experience was mostly positive, and I think a lot of that is just the time that I entered the animal law movement and sort of the legal sphere. It's definitely changed a lot, even in the last 4 or 5 years. And I was also at a school that is pretty animal law friendly, and it's growing. Like this semester, they're just opening a new animal legal education initiative at GW, which is really cool to have been there right before that started. So I didn't get pushback from the university or anything like that. And to the extent that I had opportunities to go to other schools or try other electives, I was very supported. I think there's still pushback when there's been a really interesting chat going on right now in the chat about sort of intersections between animal law and other areas of social justice. And that's something that I do a lot of writing and thinking about. And I think that's where sometimes you do see some of the tension. Not because I think there needs to be tension. My writing is often saying like these things are much more interconnected than we often think. But, as a couple of anecdotal examples, I took elective classes in international climate change law at the law school and sustainable agricultural practice at the geography school. And in both, I wrote about animal agriculture and how destructive it is to the environment and the people and the animals involved. And in both classes, you get pushback from other students who might be coming at it from a non-vegan perspective, who don't fully see why you're pushing animal issues in, say, like the climate space. So there is sometimes pushback. Yeah, Jodi's reaction is exactly right. So there's sometimes pushback there. And then again, flip that within the animal space. Sometimes you get people who say, why are you focused on human rights problems and not animal issues, without seeing how they're interconnected? So, there can be tension and pushback in that way. And to kind of just flag or like highlight a panel that I'm going to be really lucky to be on next week in Toronto. Eastland Gambert at GW Law teaches a seminar called Gender, Race, and Species. And Matthew Liebman in San Francisco teaches a similar sort of animal law as multidimensional issue course. And the two of them are going to be speaking about that next week at the Canadian Animal Law Conference. And I'm going to get to be a part of that conversation too, about how to teach animal law in a way that makes it more multidimensional, that it's not just, the few vegans from law school all taking an animal law course. And that wasn't my experience in animal law, just to put it out there. I thought it was a terrific seminar, the pure animal law course, but it can be a little bit echo chambery based on who's self-selecting into animal law. And so thinking about ways to introduce animal law into other parts of the legal discipline and teaching it sort of more across discipline within law school is really interesting. And I'm looking forward to that conversation next week.
I like that. So yeah, so it's not just such a, it's not just like an extension of I'm a vegan student, so I'm going to take this. It's like, oh, just like you want to be aware of women's rights, social justice, or sorry, racial justice, you want to have this as a foundation as a lawyer. That's kind of where it's going.
Exactly. So the class that I took that Iselin will be speaking about next week is called Gender, Race, and Species. And it's very much about sort of applying critical theory across the board with social justice. So we had modules that focused purely on, say, queer liberation. And maybe that week we didn't talk that much about animals. But then when we had other weeks where we talked a lot about animals and speciesism and what are the connections between how hierarchies are created and perpetuated, and really trying to kind of drill down to sort of what what folks have called like the roots of hierarchies and oppression. So it was really trying to incorporate it into a much broader social justice framework than just teaching the course as here's the Endangered Species Act and how we apply it, which is important to know too, but just different ways to get about it.
I think I'm chairing this panel, I think.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Well,
it'll be a great conversation.
Yeah, it sounds fascinating. And speaking of, I actually want to, because Jason, of course, well, you've been involved in the past, Jason, but you've got your Veg Fest. But these other three here are actually quite involved in next week's conference. And so we got a little taste of what Michael's going to be talking about and presenting around. Jodi, can you give us a little sense? You're actually on 2 panels, and so can you give us a little taste of what to expect out of those?
At this moment, I am on 2 panels, yes.
And moderating probably a few.
Yeah, I'm going to present some older work on, so I was invited to just participate in like an animals and family law panel, the first animal law paper that, well, actually, no, the first paper I wrote after being hired as a prof, animal law paper was on intersections between animal law and family law and like who gets the dog, right? In the context of like family breakdown, divorce. So I'll present that. And then I'm also going to present more of an idea than a paper at this point, which is based on like my next big project coming off of the ag stuff, which I think will be a book on agricultural exceptionalism in Canada and how how animal ag gets privileged treatment from policymakers, legislators with respect to like human rights and animal violence, of course, and like state resources and in all kinds of different forms. I'm going to have to think through this a bit further over the next week, but
I love this idea. And the idea of this animal agriculture exceptionalism, is that your term, Jodi?
No, so it's a term of art, but there's quite a bit of literature on it out of the US, but very little in Canada, a couple of papers. And there's really, I think, room for exploring that question here.
Yeah, love it. Okay. Excellent, Jodi. Thank you. And Angela, give us a little idea of what you're going to be talking about at the conference.
Yeah. Okay, great. So I'm going to be one of the scholars track speakers on the Friday.
Yeah.
So that's part of, so Canadian Animal Law Conference starts on Friday night with the keynote speech by Martha Nussbaum, and then there's the sessions on Saturday and Sunday. But then before that, we've got the North American Animal Law Conference, which is the scholars track presentations. So basically they're like an hour and a half where you've got somebody presenting their work, and then there's a moderator who's like paired with them to kind of ask really particular questions and things like that, and then some audience participation. Anyway, so that's what's happening on the Friday. So I'm in one of those spots working, presenting work on personhood and property status for non-human animals. It's a concept I call quasi-property, quasi-personhood. And I'm going to explain that and then face very tough questions from my commentator. So it'll be really good. I'm wondering about working that idea out for a book length project, but I have a history book I'm working on still right now on a fishing case. So I'm trying to bring in consideration for the fish into that project. So I don't know when the quasi book's going to start happening, but hopefully it will soon. And this presenting always helps you with this, because you get good ideas from people and things you haven't thought of and that kind of thing. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Excellent, Angela. And Michael, I do want to address the second panel you're doing, because it's really fascinating work. And actually, we're going to have Justin on a future Lunchtime Live soon, Justin Marceau. But can you just give a little tiny little description of this?
Sure. I just thought I'd put it in the chat in case we're out of time. But
Yeah.
I'll also be on a panel with Justin and Elle Jones. We're going to be talking about the theme is critical carcerality. And I'll be presenting specifically on a paper that I wrote for the University of Miami Race and Social Justice Law Review earlier this year about the use and abuse of non-human animals by the carceral state. So I talk about in that paper everything from tracing the history from sort of colonialism and the use of bloodhounds through to slave dogs to modern police dogs, and then also sort of how police harm animals, whether it's dolphins in the Navy to police forces that they're using, and then how police use companion animals to justify surveillance and police by PGM communities, Black Indigenous communities of the global majority, and how that gets at some of these underlying structures that I mentioned earlier of hierarchy and speciesism. And in the paper, I talk a little bit about how that gets at things like gendered language and other tools of oppression that I might not have time for in the panel, but it should be a really, really wonderful conversation.
Excellent. Calvin's saying he wants to see that paper, Michael. So, and Calvin's doing amazing work with Evolve Our Prison Farms. So definitely we'll have to hook you two up. Okay, well, I would love, and I'm sure we would love to go on and on with this conversation because there's so much we didn't even get to. I'm sorry if we didn't get to your questions. But yeah, there's some great comments. Debbie says, love being privy to such thoughtful, compassionate, intelligent conversations. Jenny said, the conference looks amazing. I'd like to split myself into 4 to listen to all the tracks. Me too, Jenny, it's so hard. It was a little good when it was online because I could go back and forth, but I can't do that in person. So, and Jason, I want you to just one more little shout out for the Veg Fest that's happening on Saturday. Can you just tell people, we've got a link that people can go to find out more, but it's happening Saturday, and tell them who is joining.
Yeah, sure. So we have we've got Jordan Reichert from the Animal Protection Party of Canada. So he's the deputy leader. Then we've got Dr. Charu Chandrasekhara, who is, I think, Canada's leading voice against animal testing in the sciences. And then we also have Isaias Fernandez,
We've had Isaias on our panel here in AJA. Yes.
Oh, good. Well, wonderful. Yeah. So he's going to be another speaker, and then we've got Patrick Baboumian from the Game Changers. So he's going to be in Winnipeg in a few hours. So yeah.
Amazing. That sounds fabulous. So you can go to Winnipeg on Saturday, come to Toronto the next Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and you're going to just be perfect as an animal advocate. All right, so folks, thank you so much. Our panelists, Ina, do you mind taking us off of Spotlight so they can see the whole gallery of folks that are cheering them on? I just want to say we've got, I want to just thank Michael for your time, Michael. Jodi, it's so good to have you here. And once again, Angela, thank you for all of your contributions, not only here, but to animal justice, and same to Jodi. And Jason, thank you for everything you're doing out there in Winnipeg. Animal Justice Academy, folks, can we give our panelists a big AJ? Thank you. Yes, love it.
Thank you for having us. And just to talk about our work and the conference, it's super exciting.
Yeah, it's really exciting to know. Like I said, it's good to know smarty pants like you are doing your thing, because it is huge. It's quiet. We don't hear tons of it, but it's happening in really powerful arenas in the world. And we're so thankful to you for the work you're doing, folks. All right, we'll see you in 2 weeks. Look out for the announcement. It's actually going to be me talking to you and doing a Q&A about how to become a more effective and enduring animal advocate. So your chance to get a little bit of coaching. It's come around once every 4 times a year we do that, and I would love to see you there in 2 weeks. Same place, same time. Take care, everyone, and thank you so much for being part of this community. Bye-bye.